Good day, ladies and gentlemen. I welcome you to today's podcast where we delve into a critical and often overlooked aspect of terrorism, which is narco terrorism. As we explore this complex issue today, we'll be addressing several key questions that shed light on its impact, scope, and the measures taken to counter it. We would be holding three podcasts on this particular subject because it's a large one, and today we'll be dealing with part one of it. Our first question probes into the companies and organizations actively engaged in preventing narco terrorism in India. From governmental agencies to private security firms and NGOs, I, a myriad of entities play a crucial role in thwarting the nefarious activities of drug traffickers who fund terrorism. By understanding their roles, we gain insight into the collaborative effort required to combat this threat effectively. But before we dive deeper into the landscape of narco terrorism in India, let's ensure we are all on the same page regarding what exactly is narco terrorism, what it entails, and how it differs from other forms of terrorism. Before we start, I'd like to tell you something about the organization NISSMAT. NISSMAT stands for National Institute of Security, Safety, Management, and Applied Technology. It has four wings: the Security Forum, what we are doing today, and that's NISSMAT Forum. The second is NISSMAT Education. The third is NISSMAT Enterprise. And the fourth is NISSMAT Foundation. We have two illustrious speakers with us. One is Mr. Sipal Singh, who's a senior retired police officer from the government of India, who's dealt with the subject of narco terrorism during his tenure in service. And the second is Major General Deepak Mehta, who during his service has dealt with this subject on the Burmese border to a very large extent. I start by asking the first question to Mr. Sipal Singh, that if he could just explain to us as to what is narco terrorism and how is it different from other forms of terrorism. Mr. Sipal Singh.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pawan Aliwalia. I think it's very, very pertinent that before we delve into the subject as such, we understand what is narco terrorism. Now, narco terrorism is there. It is a sort of nexus between the terrorists. We all know we have been talking about terrorist activities, terrorism, etc. But this narco terrorism means it is a nexus between terrorists and the narcotic trade criminals. When terrorist organizations get fund and get their activities funded through drug trafficking, then it becomes narco terrorism. In the Indian context, it has very significant implication for national security. In this symbiotic relationship, in a sort of symbiotic relationship between the terrorist organization and the narcotic producer, seller, and funder. Now, thus, when we are talking about narco terrorism, we must understand that the key characteristics of the funding mechanism for the terrorists goes to the narco trade, narcotic trade. Hence, it is called narco terrorism. This primarily sustains, the terrorism primarily sustains itself through the profits generated from the narcotic trade. Now, the revenue generated from these activities, that is by the narcotic criminals, is then utilized to fund terrorist operations, maybe purchase of weapons, maybe other operation. The terrorist operations are funded through these narcotic criminals. Now, narco terrorism involves a diversification of activities. This diversification often makes this group more challenging for us to combat, because how is diversification? It involves the producer, it involves the intermediary seller, it also involves that it lands up in the hands of persons who are associated with terrorists. This diversification often makes these groups, that is narco terrorism, as more challenging to combat with by the agencies who are dealing with that. Implication of national security in this context is great. Several regions within the country of India, such as Jammu and Kashmir and parts of Northeast, have experienced the this intertwining of insurgency, terrorism, and narcotic trade. Where there's insurgency and narcotic trade, where there's acute terrorism, terrorists and the narcotic trade, this intertwining is there. Now, the key points which we consider in the case of narco terrorism is that what are their cross-border operations and how they affect the agencies who are dealing with them. What is the social impact of this narco terrorism? What are the interconnections, international interconnections between the terrorist and international organization, and need for evolving comprehensive strategies to challenge narco terrorism by the agencies dealing with terrorism. Now, this means the agencies which are dealing with narco terrorism, they should have much more adaptability. They should have much more variation to deal with them, because you are dealing with corrupt criminals and making our borders vulnerable to these criminals with the narco terrorism, with the terrorism. Now, narco terrorism with its unique blend is a sort of unique blend, as I said, of the criminals and the terrorist activities. Therefore, I told you, presents a formidable challenge to national security in India. I'll also briefly touch that there are areas which have been suffering, been affected by national terrorism in Jammu and Kashmir and northern region also to a great extent, and it had created security challenges. The convergence of insurgency, the convergence of terrorism, and the narcotic trade in these regions have given us a great challenge, a formidable challenge for the security agencies. That is why I say that in addition to the challenges posed to the security agencies, there's also a socio-economic impact of this narco-terrorism. Hence, there's need to deal comprehensively with various strategies to narco-terrorism.
So thank you very much. But tell me, narco-terrorist groups are often very adaptable, resilient, and how we'll come back to that. But first, let's look into what are the agencies which are available in India to combat narco-terrorism.
Yeah. The key agencies which are involved in India with narco-terrorism are A, Narcotics Control Bureau, NCB. The role of NCB is the primary agency responsible for coordinating and implementing anti-narcotic measures in India is the NCB. NCB conducts intelligence-driven operations basically and coordinates with other law enforcement agencies and other participants in the international collaboration to deal with narco-terrorism. Now, the second agency, which is very important, is the CBI. The Central Bureau of Intelligence is basically an anti-corruption agency, primary anti-corruption agency, but through its investigation, it involves also when it is dealing with the nexus between the drug trafficking and terrorism. At that point of time, the CBI has to collaborate with other agencies and ensure coordinated approach in tackling with such cases. Because it's central agency, it will have to cooperate probably with the state agencies, or it may have to cooperate with the NCB. Now, Intelligence Bureau is basically primarily an intelligence agency of this center, but it also has, in a way, to deal with the narco-terrorism. How? Whenever threat is posed to the national security through nexus between terrorist organization and drug trafficking, it comes into play. The Intelligence Bureau comes into play so that it is able to determine who are the people, which are the people who are dealing or who are trying to make them function in a coordinated manner. Then you have got another agencies which is basically focuses on monitoring and activities beyond the Indian border, that is RAW, Research and Analysis Wing. But in Research and Analysis Wing, basically, I have told you, is concerned with the crimes and other security impact which is outside the country, analyze their activities beyond Indian border. But when it comes to transnational movements of narcotics with the terrorists, then RAW also come into viewing because the international movements is there. And the border security force, of course, plays a crucial role in preventing the cross-border movements of drugs on the border. It also conducts regular patrolling. It also conducts regular surveillance to curb this controversy. Then you also have the Central Police Force, which is the primary agency for maintaining law and order. But when it is deployed in the states to curb terrorism or to deal with insurgency or to deal with law and order, and in those areas where narco terrorism is concerned, CRP may also play a role in supporting the law enforcement agencies of the state. Then we come to the state agencies. The role of the state police agencies across different states in India is actively involved in preventing and investigating cases related to drug trafficking and terrorism. Now, state police carries out investigation, conducts raids, and enforces law-related points regarding narcotics and terrorism with their jurisdiction, wherever the jurisdiction of the state police organization, the SP is concerned, the DIG is concerned, the IG is concerned. They often collaborate with the central agencies. The state agency will collaborate with the central agency. If it's a CRP dealing there, this is collaborate with CRP. If their BSF is pointed out, then they'll collaborate with the BSF. But if they come from international, they may have to collaborate with RAW or even inform the National Crime Bureau, which is Narcotic Crime Bureau, is the main agency. Then we have got the Directorate of Revenue Intelligence. Now, interestingly, DRI focuses mainly on illicit cross-border movements of goods. Directorate of Revenue is concerned with cross-border movements of goods, including narcotics. Try to understand. Including narcotics. Basically, is concerned with cross-border movements of goods, but also involves narcotics. So it plays a role indirectly in detecting and addressing cases which are involved in smuggling of drugs. In the process of smuggling of drugs, some of these narcotics lords, they may be having intention to fund the terrorist activities in a particular area. So the contraband goods which are being sent into India from outside, that is the Directorate of Revenue Intelligence role. But in this process, many a time, these are also involved that some people, narcotic traders are also coming from this cargo. So there is a lot of overlapping and collaboration which is required. Recently, Government of India has, a few years back, Government of India had created another agency known as FIU. That is called Financial Intelligence Unit. It mainly, its efforts are also against anti-terrorism by analyzing the data, tracking the financial transaction associated with the drug trafficking and terrorism. So it provides a sort of actionable intelligence, I will say, to the law enforcing agency. Then the recent, as they say, a few years back, we came to have another agency that's called National Investigation Agency, NIA. The functions of NIA are to prosecute cases relating to terrorism, including those involving the nexus between drug trafficking and terrorism, because their role is to cases relating to terrorism. But if this terrorism have a nexus with some drug trafficking or with some narcotic law, then naturally NIA also comes into play. And it collaborates and authenticates the other agencies for a comprehensive approach to have counter narco terrorism efforts. These agencies work together as well as independently in some cases to address the multifaceted challenges which are posed by the narco terrorists. That is how these agencies are placed, and that is how they play their role. Thank you.
General Mehta, um, I direct this question to you. How widespread is the issue of narco terrorism in India?
You see, as Mr.
Hello,
Sripath has very clearly
Deepak,
brought out,
did you get my
the
question?
narco terrorism is interrelated with terrorism and narcotics trade. Basically, it is our border states which are most affected where insurgency has been since long. Be it in the West, it was at one point in time, Punjab was very active. In the Northeast, there are disturbed states like Manipur, Nagaland, Mizoram. So basically, it is the areas which have been historically historically insurgent activities have taken place. The hotspots, as I mentioned, is primarily where the roots of the terrorists take place, because that is the safest way where the narcotics also takes place, is also inducted. And as Mr. Sipal had brought, there's a very close linkage between the terrorist groups and the narcotic trade. So basically, I feel that it is most prevalent in the border states, be it in Punjab, the northeast states of Nagaland, Mizoram, Manipur, and where, secondly, is where the economics of the people are low, those people can be exploited, and this is where the narcotics uh, can be put in, and these are the people who could be also picked up by the terrorist organizations to fund them, to help them. I don't think very deep. There's very big deep ingress of the narco terrorism in the country per se. It is more prevalent in the regions along the border where smuggling of or transportation of narcotics takes place. That's be in the west or in the east, northeastern states. Per se, I don't think there's much of a. Now, of course, the young generation, they are getting involved for usage, not for terrorism per se. The rave parties which are taking place all over the country, yes, they get the narcotics from the handlers. So, but they're not part of terrorism per se. This is what I have to say, sir.
Deepak,
I
just
may,
kind
you,
one question, Mr. Sipal Singh, one second. I just let me just uh, now you see, as far as preventive measures are concerned, education, in my opinion, would play a very important role
Yes.
in preventing narco terrorism from coming in, and even from uh, drugs moving from across the border, let us say from the Myanmar side or from Pakistan side into India. Education of the masses is absolutely essential. And how do you think that this role is getting played out?
Yes, I agree with you. And another factor, what you to your education factor, is the socio-economic disparity within the population. This disparity could be because of wealth, because of lack of education, which you brought in, and also lack of employment. These are the people who could be exploited by the terrorists to be carriers of narcotics and also help them in their terrorist activities.
Mr. Sipal Singh, you had something to answer.
yeah, I want to emphasize on one point. General Deepak has clearly said that it is in some areas, not in the country as such, that narco terrorism is much more prevalent due to certain reasons. I like to touch upon these areas. For example, Jammu and Kashmir is pointed out. Jammu and Kashmir has long been a region affected by insurgency and terrorism. Long way. So, in view of its long drawn out insurgency, the narcotic lords have also pushed in their activities here. So, therefore, this area has been susceptible to narco terrorism. Then the
May I add
northeast,
one more thing, sir?
the
Uh,
northeastern state, northeastern state, certain states in northeast, such as Manipur, Nagaland, Assam have experienced insurgency led by various ethnic and separatist groups. Here also, they have a soft ground, soft target to push in. Then there is places which are close, general, to the Golden Triangle region, which encompass parts of Myanmar, Thailand, and Laos. This neighboring region has much more implication for India's security due to effects of narco terrorism. In the western borders, you have seen the state of Gujarat and Rajasthan have faced challenges of this narco terrorism and drug trafficking. Punjab, of course, I was there, particularly during the 80s, and there have been concerned about the funding of extreme activity through the narcotic states. If you permit me for a minute more, Mr. Pawan, I may add a experience in Punjab. The number of financial institutions that was they cropped up, mushroomed in India, in Punjab at that point of time. In one of the institutions, which were called a private financial institutions cropped up. When we delved into the accounts of the financial institutions, we found that lot of funds were being received by them from some people. And how is it that these people are giving so much funds to them? When we traced the origin, these funds were coming from outside, from their sympathizer, through certain routes, even violating PAMELA, that is Prevention of Money Laundering Act, even violating FEMA, and they were landing in the hands of these sympathizers in Punjab, who in turn gave it to these financial agencies, private financial agencies, who in turn gave it to terrorists to purchase weapons and deal with it. So therefore, Punjab, particularly during these days when it was having extreme activities, had lot of, I mean, even now narco terrorism continues in a different form. We'll see when we come to how they're affecting the social structure. But these are the points which I'd like to add to what General Deepak has said about the prevalence of narco terrorism in India.
Thank you very much. I just have one added question. Now, given the current situation in Punjab, there are drugs that are flowing from across the border. We have the BSF, which is patrolling the areas to prevent the local distribution or receiving of drugs within the area of Punjab. How effective are our local agencies in curbing the drugs inflow into our country?
So you're asking me, can I?
Yeah, sure. This is a police question, actually. So
My reply is very simple. And I think I've dealt in one of your other interviews some months back, that when they deployed BSF within the area of 50 kilometers, if any smuggling takes place, when the center deployed BSF gave order within 50 kilometers of the area of the borders. At that time, points were raised how BSF is going to help. Now, ultimately, it was pointed out that the BSF is able to get some such narcotic laws and drug traffickers, then they will immediately hand over to the concerned police station. What could be the consequences of this smuggling? That's a different role. Now that role is probably in Punjab diminished. That is funding the terrorist activities. But the role other is there, that they are making the youth of Punjab drug addict. That is the play now role, which is more important for us to consider.
May I say a few words on this issue, Pawan?
Yeah.
Firstly, as far as Punjab is concerned, now what is happening latest is that the people from the West, the smugglers, were assisting in sending the drugs, as also helping the so-called inimical groups in Punjab. They're using drones. A number of drones have been shot down by the BSF, which are there. And now I think the surveillance system has also come up reasonably well along the western borders to identify and get the drones down. As far as J&K is concerned, they were actually using the tunnels, which were the ingress routes for the terrorists. And this was the route which was being used also for induction of drugs. But now the BS have been able to find a large number of these tunnels. And if you come down to the Gujarat side, besides the BSF, there's also the Gujarat police, which is involved directly, as Mr. Sipal has said, the local police is involved. But lately, very large quantity of drugs is being inducted into the country by the sea, by the shipping, these fishing boats. So those things have to be kept in mind. But I think we are doing okay in terms of catching a large consignments. And with the surveillance improving on the western borders, things will improve. Now, as far as the eastern borders are concerned, the central government is proposing to make a fence as what is done in the western border. So there would be certain amount of uh, slowing down of flowing of people and also of narcotics. That's all. Thanks.
When people are caught smuggling or dealing with narcotics, what is the type of punishment that they have? Because in Southeast Asia, they've been able to curtail it by having a death penalty, even if you have a small quantity of drugs on you. But in India, that does not seem to be the case. Do you think because India is following more of the American culture where they're trying to prevent drugs from coming into India, but the usage is still abounding? Uh, what is your opinion about this, Mr. Sipal Singh?
Yes, I mean, I like to touch upon, continue the link referred to by Janadeepak. He said in Western border, the surveillance has improved and we have been able to catch some large consignments. About few months back, a consignment of drugs was caught on the Western borders, a ship carrying huge number of narcotics. But that was the intelligence orientation operation by the NCB, National Control Bureau, who caught it. Because when they were dealing lately with some important case somewhere in Bombay, NCB, which I not like to refer at this stage, at that point, this point also came up that if they can have the intelligence operation to catch such consignment, why the hell they are not able to catch some people or some parties who are indulging in this state somewhere in Bombay? So this is one point. Second point, which I like to emphasize, Pawanji, is the linkages with the international networks in narco terrorism. The linkages are much more important. Now, for example, international connections which are there, like Lashkar-e-Toba. Now, Lashkar-e-Toba is based in Pakistan and has been known to collaborate with international drug traffickers network. But Lashkar-e-Toba is basically based in Pakistan, but has been very, very active in J&K and also in Punjab. Then there's a Jaish-e-Mohammed.
So one second, we are diverting from the question that I
No,
asked.
I'm saying these organizations.
I'll repeat my question. My question is the punishment that is meted out.
Sir, I'm coming to the last conclusion and line. Anyway, I've just touched with these organizations plus some other organizations. Now the question is, under which act they are booked? If they are booked under National Crime Bureau's NCB, then they have got different punishments. There is enhanced punishment even for 1 gram or 2 gram of drug being in their possession. So there's a different punishment. When they are caught by the terrorist organization, then if we book them under the national acts which are for dealing with the terrorists, then the punishment will come under terrorism. Then if you have got to deal with them on the drugs which are being imported and being given to the local youth, then probably it is a different. So the question is under which particular act they are booked. And I am sure that as far as the, you said, enactment are concerned, there are adequate and sufficient punishment laid down. Question is, are we able to apply those acts? Question is, are those being effectively applied? But the punishments are national intelligence and national investigating agencies has booked most of the people under the terrorist act, and terrorist act goes up to life imprisonment, and also some cases even you give them the death sentence. So the question is, booking them under different acts is a different thing. There are adequate provision in most of the acts to deal with them, but the effectiveness and investigation to take it to the culmination of punishment is not there.
No, my question was slightly different. It is the quantum of deterrence that comes in with punishment. Like in Southeast Asia, you have death for possession of drugs. In India, it is you don't have a death sentence for possession of drugs. So that is why there is a deterrence, but it is not as much of a deterrence as it is in Southeast Asia. That was the point that I was coming to.
There are death sentences also on the Terrorist Act. I also reply you to legitimize the proceeds of the narcotic trade. These narco terrorists also come under PAMLA, which has sufficient deterrent. Even if you catch order them, you may not give them bail for years together under PAMLA, because PAMLA also is a very stringent provision. And those people who are giving them, they try to legitimize their trade by violating PAMLA. So the Prevention of Money Laundering Act has sufficient deterrent. So therefore, I beg to differ that it is not, you can't just say the other countries have death sentence, or hence it's a question of how you apply these acts. Whether you are put a person under PAMLA, whether you are put under the NCB, or you are dealing with them under normal laws of the country for their sort of destroying the social structure.
I want to ask another police question actually, and that is, who decides as to what act does a person get booked under?
Who decides?
Let us say that there is a person who is caught with drugs or peddling in drugs or whatever. Who decides as to which act does he get booked under?
Sir, it's a question of booking all laws which are having cognizable offenses are applicable. Like if maybe A agency or B agency. If agency NIA has booked, it's not necessary that it will book. National Investigating Agency will book only under the Terrorist Act. They may book them under various other acts of the Indian Penal Code, various other enactments of the Indian Penal Code. The agency which is booking them, it is the agency which is investigating them. And in turn, it is not that if you are investigating to some extent and you need the help of another investigating agency, then you pass out the case half-baked to that agency. But invariably, the agency which books them, it is the agency which applies the law, which charge sheeted them under law. So therefore, there's no such thing who is responsible. Every such agency which is dealing has its own responsibility. It's not a question that since the punishment is higher, hand will pass on to NIA, or the punishment is higher, so we pass on to NCB. All laws are applicable, and every law can be charge sheeted under all law. There's no question this law is only be charge sheeted under this law by so and so. All the laws which are available, maybe it is National Investigating Agency, maybe it's the NCB, maybe it is the local agency. Sometimes the local authorities also, they can put them under the Money Laundering Act. There's no such prohibition. But you are right when you say that there are some agencies which are dealing with them probably more strictly. In that cases, we sometimes refer the case to the central agencies. All right, this is not so. The state government may decide that in this case refers to a little higher punishment, so they'll pass it on to NIA, or they will pass on to NCB. In any case, NCB is also collaborating with most of the narcotic crimes. So NCB invariably is in the picture when dealing with it. My submission is that there is a question of more of collaboration than collaboration and giving to a particular and charging in a particular act. It's not a question of who will do. Everyone can do. But question is whether they discharge their responsibility properly or not. That I am doubtful. Or I also told to you, the half-baked investigation, some people may not. So in that case, it depends upon the state government or the central government to transfer the particular case to central agency. It is not confined to ABC.
So let me now move on to General Mehta. Uh, who are the key players in the narco terrorism business of India? In
Right.
India?
As has been brought out earlier in the talk and discussions, it is basically the border states and insurgent groups who are operating, abetting insurgency in the border states. Let's start from the West. West is our western neighbor, Pakistan. There are basically three groups there. One is Lashkar-e-Taiba, which is abetting insurgency in J&K, and it's been assessed that they are in narcotics trade. In a sense that they are very all these three groups are very closely related to the Golden Crescent. Golden Crescent is Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Iran. So there is no problem of getting any drugs from them. So they are the ones who are sending across. The second group is Hizbul Mujahideen, which went Salahuddin from J&K went across, settled down in Muzaffarabad. This group has also been assessed to be involved in narcotics smuggling and narcotics trade to assist them in the operations. And the third group is Jaish-e-Mohammed. All these three groups are Pakistan based. Now, what Mr. Sipal had mentioned initially, these insurgent groups, they have three ways of funding. One is state sponsored, one is by fundraising, and third is by narcotics trade. Now, these three organizations which are operating from the West, someone says that they are state sponsored. Maybe, because if they're getting into India along the border posts, apparently must be having some support there. Now, coming down to the East, they initially ULFA, which is this group which was based in Assam, they were involved in insurgency and also for narcotic trade, but ULFA has now been split. One faction of ULFA has come into agreement with the government of India. The other small faction of Parol Barua, he is across the border in Myanmar, between Myanmar and China. Yes, he is definitely involved in narcotics trade. And then, of course, we have this National Socialist Council of Nagaland Kaflang group. This is one group which is very active in Nagaland, Mizoram, Manipur, wherever the Naga habitations are there. Yes, they are involved. They're very close to the Golden Triangle. They are involved in narcotics trade. Besides this, now, of course, now there's Maoists, we call them as Naxalites in the operating the central India. They also would be getting some support in narcotics. Of course, they're involved in extortion and trade of wood, but I'm sure they would be definitely getting something in narcotics too. Besides these three areas, then you have individual smuggling groups. Now, these individuals may be involved, may not be involved with the terrorist groups, but yes, they are definitely large number of groups, young people for making money. They're involved in this. Then you have international drug trafficking network. Now, earlier that there is some talk that the drugs are coming from South American states, which were involved in manufacture of drugs. They come to our porous borders, be it Myanmar or be it in our western border, and then they come into India. So basically, these are the groups which are involved in insurgency and terrorism. As I mentioned, the West, there are three: Lashkar-e-Taiba, Hizbul Mujahideen, and Jaish-e-Mohammed. In the East, you have the ULFA, you have NSCN, Kaflang, and the Maoist group. Besides that, as I mentioned, there are independent traders also, but that's about it as far as the major players in this field is concerned.
Oh, thank you very much. Which out of them is the most dangerous group?
The most vigorous group today
Yes.
is along our western border with the three groups, as I mentioned, who are Pakistan based. They're there. Now, in Manipur also, there are the cookies and the Meiteis. The cookies are holding onto the hills. The basic problem between in Manipur is uh, drugs. The one tribe which is on the hillside, they are doing extensive cultivation of poppy. So that is one area which has to be kept under very surveillance uh, to make sure that the drugs do not flow in from the east onto the central into our mainland India. So all these groups are as much involved as anyone else.
I'd like to add one thing. All this is well said. What we have dealt, General Deepak and Ms. Pawan Ahluwalia, is we are dealing with narco terrorism. That means there is definitely definition, and we have already considered it then. The relationship is there between the narcotic class as well as the terrorists and various implications to the security or safety of India. But
Correct.
the most important point which you must keep in view, or with everyone, the viewer must keep in view, narco terrorism has become a very dangerous sort of terrorism because it is not only narco terrorism, but it demonstrates the sophistication and adaptability of narco terrorists with the money laundering groups.
Correct, sir.
That is the more important point. The money laundering groups which are operating, these narco terrorists have sort of adaptability and they are combining their efforts along with money laundering group. Through this money laundering group, the funding comes in India, which in turn have the safety implication or security implication for India. So the collaboration, the financial collaboration makes this particular narco terrorism as much more challenging for the authorities. Narco terrorism in India is not only confined within the national borders, it comes from outside. Within the national border, as you said, in Mizoram and etc., probably with due course of time you are able to control. But the question is what is coming from outside the borders? That is the funding, that is the money laundering group. So my submission is that financial collaboration makes it much more challenging. And therefore, in this collaboration, most of the organization in India, which are all, the state government will not be involved. It will be basically the central agencies, they'll be able to give a hint. Intelligence Bureau will give you, NCP will give you some information, and National Investigating Agency will give you, RAW will give you. So which are the financial cooperation we have to see so the narco terrorism in India can be at least met with a formidable challenge as it has the impact on the national security.
Okay, well, one question that I have is what are the root causes that contribute to the rise of narco terrorism, especially in India?
All
Deepak?
right. Firstly, in my view, it is the socio-economic disparity, which I had mentioned about. The could be the wealth, could be education, could be like for example, certain states where the young generation is now highly dependent on drugs, lack of employment. This is one of the reasons. Socioeconomic reasons could be one. Uh, this can be exploited by the terrorist groups because all these fellows who become junkies, they are looking for money. And these are the people who could be exploited by the inimical groups to carry out the task which they intend to do. Next aspect is the porous borders, which we have discussed adequately. Any border which is porous, especially along the Golden Triangle and the Golden Crescent, is where the large quantity of drugs are coming in from. And there's a free movement of people in the east, be it Nagaland, Manipur. Now that movement is going to be controlled with the wire fence having likely to come up. And the passes being given will be very selective to the people to go across and meet their relatives across the border. And the third aspect I feel is the weak law enforcement, which we have discussed adequately. This could be because of lack of resources, but the resources are being put on the ground, like the surveillance devices and other things which I don't want to mention here. Yes, uh, these are the things like with Mr. Sipal has said, money laundering, the Hawala aspects. These people who are caught should be taken, stringent action should be taken against them. And third aspect, another aspect of root causes, what are the reasons for insurgency? These have to be addressed, like what has been addressed in Assam, the very good thing. What has been addressed in Manipur, again, it's very good. As the government starts dealing with the insurgent groups, I think this problem of narcotic trade or narcotic influx is going to reduce.
May I add something?
So,
Is it permitting?
Please go on, sir. Please go on. Please carry on. You wanted to
Yes,
say.
I was saying he has very adequately pointed out what can be done. Now, the offenses, as you mentioned, I am only coming to that.
You're coming back to the offenses part.
Offenses are adequately covered, let us say, under the NDPS. NDPS is only meant for this, is a watchdog sort of thing over this narcotic manufacture, criminal activities of the narcotic. But somehow or other, the refinement, gradually refinement is required in these. If there's a transshipment of narcotic drugs under Psychopathic and Narcotic Drug Act, there's no, it is not shipment, they change it. If it is a question of being in their possession, before it comes to their possession, they say who is the carrier or who is the giver. So these are certain lacunas. It needs law and then refinement in the law. Then we have dealt these cases under, I told you, Unlawful Activity Prevention Act. It's a very serious, it's a very strong act. UAPA, Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, is another very important law that addresses activities detrimental to the sovereignty and integrity of India. Any activity which is detrimental to the sovereignty, which is detrimental to the integrity of India, comes under UAPA, Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. But in this case, how many cases are charged under the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act? Because you may charge them, but they were not able to prove whether this unlawful activity was addressed in a manner which was detrimental to the sovereignty and integrity of India. Money laundering laws, as I told you already, such as Prevention of Money Laundering Act, that is PAMELA, or Foreign Exchange Management Act, that is FEMA, are crucial for tackling the financial aspects of narco terrorism linked to money laundering and illicit funding. Integration of intelligence and law enforcement agencies is important. Some intelligence agencies provide that, but the law enforcement agencies are not able to take it to the final conclusion. Collaboration between agencies is critical for gathering evidence also, because one agency which starts is gather some evidence which does not go to the next agency. Then there's also very essential need for international cooperation and capacity building in our own organizations. Now, public awareness, as you mentioned, is important because why they are coming, unemployment, etc. So there is also need of public awareness and need of cooperation. So these are a few things which come to my mind. I said I'll just discuss with you that how these laws are available, yet that sort of collaboration, absolutely you are able to plug all lacunas in between when you charge and when you start investigation, whether that is a lot of ifs and buts between the investigation and the final charge sheet.
Okay. I just want to ask you, you spoke of the international connections in narco terrorism, and we have cross-border this thing. We've had this problem across the world in Colombia, where it all started off, where drugs actually started, and we had very charismatic people like Pablo Escobar, who was responsible for initiating the drug trade in Colombia. And not only did they peddle drugs, they laundered money, they did everything. They had a complete network. Does a network like this exist in India, or in India we're dealing with smaller portions of the business? Mr. Sipal Singh, would you like to take it on?
Yes, I'll not be able to delve I went directly into what happened in Colombia. But I also again and again feel that there are a lot of treaties, there are a lot of bilateral treaties for Interpol collaboration and also interference of Interpol wherever required. This bilateral agreement.
This like Pablo Escobar had created a network where he could dictate to the government as to what type of a prison does he want to go into. So they formed a prison specifically to specific Asians of Pablo Escobar, so that his prison term could be sort of expended there. So anyway, that was a side question. How crucial is the role of intelligence agencies in countering narco terrorism, Deepak?
Yes, actually, intelligence has a pivotal role in countering narco terrorism. And there are various methods which have been incorporated in that. Firstly, to get action, to act on narco terrorism has to be actionable intelligence. And how can this actionable intelligence be achieved? One is by undercover agents. The large number of countries and organizations, they infiltrate skilled operatives into this nexus or the web of narco terrorism to give them the actionable intelligence. Second, as what Mr. Sipal has said, is that the public has a very major role who can give information to the agencies involved in narco terrorism to make it actionable intelligence. Third aspect is covert is surveillance. Surveillance by means of electronics, surveillance on the money laundering, surveillance on the people who are actually trading or who are the mules who carry the drugs with them. So, and of course, I'm sure we have the capability to identify and keep the communication channels under surveillance. And of course, Mr. Sipal has also brought in is that financial transactions, money laundering, which he mentioned, is an important. And monitoring the networks. Of course, our agencies know how the networks are, who are the major operators of networks, and keep a very close watch on them. As a matter of fact, the major recovery of narcotics, which was found at one of the ports in Gujarat, was based on probably undercover agent or surveillance of our agencies to know that such a big consignment of narcotics is coming to it. So intelligence has a very major role to play, be it physical intelligence, electronic intelligence, or by any other way, or the other means, or communication intelligence. That's all I have to say. Intelligence has a very important role to play in this.
So I'll add that broadly, intelligence, broadly, we can make them fall under few heads. First is intelligence collection, as you said, and then intelligence sharing. That's the most important. Intelligence collection, intelligence. A covert agent has shared his intelligence with somebody. So intelligence sharing. Then border control measure, enhanced border surveillance. This is particularly relevant for regions with porous borders, such as Indo-Pakistan border in J&K and India-Myanmar border in the northeast. Then deployment, as you said, of technology, introduction of advanced technology, including unmanned aerial vehicles. Drones have been able to use some drones to drone fight is going on. Some drones were bringing some drugs into Punjab, and they were brought down by the BSF on the basis of intelligence generated. Then there's a need of ground sensor, satellite imagery aids, monitoring, securing border, etc. Physically, increased border patrolling is very, very important as far as our country is concerned. Then when these key points are taken into consideration, then coordinated efforts with the international agencies is very, because it's basically operated from outside. So the key points to consider would be, in addition to these measures which I have said, there should be certain refinement of law. That is, the legislative measures should be taken. Financial tracking should be taken. Public awareness campaign should be launched. So there are a lot number of these points. But the fact remains that this is the most dangerous form of terrorism. Terrorists are there, but when they combine with a narcotics, it is a great danger to the safety and security of any nation where they operate unabashedly and go on operating and creating problems.
Thank
Sir,
you.
may I add one more point here, sir?
Yeah.
What Mr. Sipal had initially said, the number of agencies which are operating or which are functioning against narco terrorism, there has to be a flow of information both vertically and horizontally between these agencies to make them very effective. So intelligence as per se is a very important facet with all the agencies which are working together. Thank you.
Yeah, you see, it's collation of information, turning information to intelligence, and then sharing intelligence. Now, this is a very complex kind of a situation and not easily managed by most intelligence companies or intelligence agencies across the world. And so I guess India is no different, because if you look at the number of agencies delving into this subject, there are far too many, from the state level to central agencies like the NCB. You have the RAW, you have IB, you have NIA, you have CBI. They're all diverse organizations with diverse roles, and to provide them with actionable intelligence is not easy. But I'm sure the government of India would be doing it in some manner or the other. Today, we've been able to cover certain aspects of narco terrorism, as to what is narco terrorism, what are the agencies that deal with it, how widespread it is narco terrorism, who are the major players involved in narco terrorism, some root causes that go into why this thing occurs, and the cruciality of the role of intelligence agencies in countering narco terrorism. Uh, we will be doing part two of this podcast on narco terrorism and take additional subjects that sort of matter in the entire thing. And as we draw to the close of our discussion on part one, it is evident that the issue is not merely confined within the borders of India, but is a global challenge that demands concerted action at all levels. We have uncovered the significant roles played by various stakeholders, from intelligence agencies to international bodies, in countering this threat. Narco terrorism's impact on national security cannot be overstated. Its insidious nature not only undermines law enforcement efforts, but also poses a grave danger to the fabric of our society. By addressing its root causes, fostering international cooperation, and bolstering intelligence capabilities, we can stem the tide of narco terrorism and safeguard our communities. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank you for joining us today, and we hope that this broadcast has provided valuable insights into multifaceted dimensions of narco terrorism and the strategies employed to combat it. Stay informed, stay vigilant, and together let's work towards a safer and more secure future for our country. And before I end, I'd like to thank you to like this podcast, to share this podcast, so that every time we put up a new podcast, you are the first persons to get informed that it has been uploaded. Thank you very much for your time and for listening into narco terrorism. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.